At 21, most people are just starting to figure out life. A new marriage, a fresh start, a chance to build something private and beautiful. But for Pearl Okafor, life changed overnight. A marriage that should have been quiet has now exploded into headlines, allegations, investigations, and whispers from all sides. And she's only just begun her story. Barely a month into this marriage, and what should have been joy has become a storm she never asked for. A young bride caught in the middle of a storm she didn't see coming. Everything around her, her marriage, her husband, her future, is suddenly on display on social media. And she has to figure out how to survive all this while the world is watching. As the headlines kept growing, the situation moved beyond social media and into official channels. According to news reports, Pastor Chris Okafor, the senior pastor of Mountain of Liberation and Miracles Ministry, was formally invited by the police to appear at the State Criminal Investigation Department, SCID Panti, Lagos. This invitation comes after several complaints were filed, all relating to alleged sexual offenses. The Lagos State Commissioner of Police, Oluhundare Jimo, directed that a thorough investigation be conducted. Officers from the SCID were assigned to handle the matter and instructed to ensure that the case was properly followed up. Pastor Chris Okafor was invited by the police, but however he did not appear as requested. Officers waited throughout the day, but he was absent. Following this, the police encouraged any alleged victims to come forward, assuring that their identities would be kept confidential. These allegations, as we all know, first began circulating on social media in mid-December 2025. Amongst those speaking publicly was Nollywood actress Doris Ogala, who claimed she had a long-term relationship with Pastor Chris Okafor. She accused him of making unfulfilled promises of marriage, sharing explicit materials, and contributing to the breakdown of her previous marriage. For one, I don't think any of her accusations matter in this situation now. I think it's more about the accusations of people like the daughters, the ex-wife. That is what is causing this investigation, because Doris's own, you're an adult, you made your decisions, but those ones, there were very serious allegations that came with them. Now, reports now indicate that the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria is considering a disciplinary action, and Pastor Chris Okafor is said to have stepped aside from his pastoral duties while the investigation continues. At this point, it's important to note that this investigation is still very much ongoing, no conclusions have been reached, and the situation is unfolding. I needed to let this information out because it is important, and it is through the lens of this new happening, this new situation that Pastor Chris Okafor is finding himself, that we're going to be looking at Pearl Okafor. Because this video is not about Chris Okafor, no. Because for Pearl Okafor, that moment has arrived when the fantasy is over and reality has come far too early, and she has to face these realities. At just 21 years old, she now finds herself embroiled in a situation she never should have been part of. A storm of headlines, allegations, and investigations. A situation that could very well define her life going forward. It's a moment where the weight of choices, of trust, and of circumstances all collide at once. And now, as the dust settles from the celebrations, the reality of what she stepped into is unavoidable. With all this unfolding, there are questions that naturally demand answers. Questions about choices, about foresight, and about how a young bride finds herself at the center of a situation no one her age should ever have to navigate. For Pearl Okafor, there are 4 key questions I want to explore. 4 questions that go beyond headlines and social media chatter. 4 questions that speak to reality, responsibility, and what it means to be in a marriage under this kind of pressure. These are the questions that help us understand not just what happened, but how someone at her age intends to face the storm she's found herself in. The first question I have is perhaps the most immediate, based on the happenings right now. Pearl Okafor, how do you intend to navigate this situation at just 21 years old? At 21, most people are learning to manage their own lives, balancing school, work, friendship, and simple responsibilities. However, Pearl is facing a situation that most women, even those much older, would find overwhelming. She's in a marriage that has suddenly become a storm of headlines, allegations, and public scrutiny. This isn't just about adjusting to living with someone. It's about adjusting to a reality where every choice, every decision can be dissected by the public, every action judged, and every moment publicized. The man she married, her husband, is under police investigation, facing accusations that have already drawn attention from the media, the church, and the wider public. And as anyone in that position, as Chris Okafor now, the pressure is going to be much. He'll be facing a lot of pressure, and it will certainly ripple through every aspect of his marriage. There's going to be changing dynamics, changing attitudes, heightening tension, and there'll be emotional strain. So think about the personal struggle. How does Pearl protect herself in a situation like this? How do you support your husband when the weight of the law, the court of public opinion, and social media is pressing down on both of you? How do you keep a marriage together when the world is watching, when your husband is under pressure, and your marriage is possibly under strain, and when you are only just beginning to understand the responsibilities of being a wife? So Pearl, looking at all the possibilities, after considering every scenario, the question remains, how do you actually intend to navigate this? How do you intend to take care of yourself, maintain some sense of normalcy, and support your husband through a situation that no ordinary person could handle at any age, let alone a young woman barely out of her teens? For a mature woman, for someone with years of experience, this would already be challenging. But for someone at just 21, this is beyond overwhelming. And that's exactly why the question demands an answer. Because it's one thing to be a bride, it's another to be at the center of a storm like this. How does she survive this? How does she navigate it without losing herself in the process? Now let's move to question number 2. Into another different layer of the story. There's something else that keeps coming to mind. In Nigeria, no matter how westernized we may have become, certain traditions are still very much alive. One of those traditions is the practice of fact-checking before marriage. You ask questions. You look into a person's past. You talk to people who know them. You try to understand who they are, what they've done, and why their life looks the way it does. So I keep asking myself, at any point, Pearl Okafor, did you or anyone in your family ever pause to ask questions, to investigate, to verify the story and what you're being told? And let's be clear, the whole pregnancy thing, because there are rumors of her being possibly pregnant, does not matter, because I firmly believe a pregnancy should never be the reason for a marriage in either direction. A man shouldn't marry a woman just because she's pregnant. Neither should a woman marry a man just because she felt pregnant for him. So, the issue here goes deeper, because before the marriage, there were already public call-outs and accusations from Doris Ogala. Serious claims already out there for anyone to see. Enough information to pause, to reflect, to ask, do I really want to be in this situationship? Let's say Pearl Okafor downplayed it. Even if she chose to ignore it, the signals were already there. The call-out alone should have been enough reason to make anyone stop and double-check, to go back and verify the facts independently. Even if the man gave his own version of events to you, you should still go back and ask questions, try to find out. But while at it, I thought maybe the wedding had already happened before the call-out. Maybe the videos were only being released afterwards. We all thought the marriage or the wedding took place at the time we saw the video, but what if the videos were only being released at that time and the marriage had already taken place? So that can exonerate her from why didn't she pause and think when Doris Ogala made the call out and all that. But it doesn't remove the responsibility of fact-checking. A 21-year-old girl cannot marry a 55-year-old man, someone who has been previously married with children, without asking concrete questions, without trying to understand why the first marriage failed, without questioning why the mother of 4 walked away. You don't just swallow everything hook, line, and sinker, even if he gives you his own version of events. Because this is not just about the age difference. The age gap alone would make this tricky even for someone more mature. But here we're talking about a young woman, barely out of her teens, stepping into a complex, high-profile, highly scrutinized situation. The public record says he's 55, and that's the number we have to work with. That alone raises questions about patterns, about wisdom, about foresight. So really, for Pearl Okafor, the question that keeps coming back to mind is this. At any point, did you or any of your family sit down and ask the hard questions? Why did this first marriage fail? Why did the mother of 4 leave? Or was it all for you, rhythm and blues? It's a question that demands an answer because nothing about that situation is ordinary. So now we'll come to the third question, and this is probably going to be the heaviest of all. And the question is this: Pearl Okafor, why do you think you'll be treated differently? And I want to be clear here. This isn't about a personal flaw. It's not about shaming anyone. This is a very common belief, actually. People always think they'll be treated differently. They think their own story will be different, that somehow the past doesn't matter to them. But here's the reality. Chris Okafor has already shown a pattern. Multiple women have come forward. Multiple allegations have been made. Time and time again, the same behavior, the same tendencies, the same outcome. He has proven over and over, according to the allegations, that he cannot treat women properly. That's the evidence that was presented. That's the reality that was brought forward. And yet, there is always this belief, oh, mine is going to be different. I'm special. He loves me. But let's pause and think about that. There's an African saying that comes to mind here. The broom that chased away the first wife is hanging on the wall, waiting for the second wife. Patterns do not change because someone signs a certificate, wears a gown or a suit, or dances to music on the wedding day. A person's character, their tendencies, and the way they act, none of that changes overnight. So most people say, oh, it doesn't matter how he treated others, I'll be treated differently, my story will be different. Even if he was bad to other women in the past, he'll treat me differently. But that's rarely how reality works. Reality sets in fast. Because you're walking the same path countless women have already walked. So why do you think you're special? Why do you think you'll be treated differently? While we're on that, let's take a look at a WhatsApp conversation posted by Doris Ogala. This message is between Ebere, Ebere, the choir member that alleged that she was impregnated by Chris Okafor. This conversation is between her brother, not her, and Pastor Chris Okafor himself. Here the brother is appealing to Chris maybe to take responsibility for the child. We don't know the full circumstances. Maybe the mother cannot take full responsibility. But the part that matters most is the reply from Chris Okafor. These are allegations because I cannot tell if this message is from him, but we frame that as allegations. Now let's look at the reply. It doesn't show any form of empathy. It doesn't show kindness. There is no emotional connection whatsoever. It doesn't suggest that he intends to connect with or care for this child in any real way. That's crucial for Pearl because she's still the center of everything. If this is how this man treats others, regardless of the circumstances, maybe he's angry that the woman came forward. She must have reached out privately before. She had no other option than to come public. But let's just forget the public call out and all that. We are looking at a man who treats others this way. The child is even his carbon copy, okay? We're not saying the child is his, but the child looks exactly like him. That should already create some sort of connection, genuine connection. A child that looks this much like me. We're not saying it's his child anyway, but what if? His reaction shows someone who is cold, unemotional, detached, and unwilling to change. The only thing he seems concerned about is the public perception, the bloggers, and damage control. No effort, no change, no responsibility taken. So we've come back to Pearl. What exactly changes for her here? How do you navigate a person like this? Maybe right now you're in a honeymoon phase when you still have butterflies in your tummy, the excitement of a new marriage, but fast forward 5 years down the line. Will he still treat you the same way? Because when a relationship is new and is in this new phase, there's always this, extra effort that is being put in. But years down the line, how is it going to be? Someone who has already repeatedly shown that they are incapable of genuine connection, the pattern eventually will show itself. He gets bored, he gets tired, he starts treating you exactly the way he treated others. The care, the attention, the considerations you see now, it might not last. And so the question lingers, heavier than before. Why do you think you're special? Why do you think you'll be treated differently? And now we arrive at the last question. We already know that the case is with the police, evidence is being gathered. We don't know how this will play out in court. We don't know how the truth may unfold. But here's the thing. If these allegations are proven to be true, Pearl Okafor, what is your plan? At 21 years old, possibly pregnant, already tied into a reality that no one her age should have to face, the fantasies, the butterflies, the dreams of a perfect marriage, let's set all of that aside because storms are already ahead. Maybe he will be proven innocent. In that case, you're free. But what if he isn't? What if he's found guilty of these accusations? What then? Because if that happens, jail time is inevitable. So what do you do? How do you intend to emotionally balance this? Life with a partner who might be jailed, the motherhood implications if the pregnancy rumors are true, or even if they are not, what then? This is the time to pause, to think, to plan, to strategize, because legal realities are coming. At 21, your brain is still learning, still adapting. But even so, since you've chosen to enter into a mature situation, this is the time to ask, what is my next move? How do I move forward with my life? What do I intend to do? Are you thinking about this carefully, or are you just imagining and living in fantasies? There's a possibility that you've been misled. Assuming that the allegations are true, it's possible that you've been misled and you do not believe the stories, the patterns that have already been established, all the multiple callouts. But there's also a point where you have to see through the illusions. Even if you don't see through them completely, even if some things remain unclear, the plan now should be, what do I do if this is proven true? How do I protect myself, my future, my potential child? How do I survive this reality? Because this is no time to wait, no time to idle around. This is no time to be answering mommy G.O. This is a time to pause, re-strategize, and prepare contingency plans. And that ultimately is the question that lingers as quietly as it is heavy. Pearl Okafor, what is your plan? How do you move forward? Because the noise may have died down, but the situation hasn't. Quietness doesn't mean resolution. Just because the headlines are fewer, just because we're not hearing about Chris Okafor every day, it doesn't mean the storm has passed. So here we are, the questions remain, the reality remains, and Pearl, this is where your next move becomes critical. 4 questions we've already asked and they remain unanswered, but these questions are important and they demand thoughts about choices, foresight, and the reality of life at 21. For Pearl Okafor, the fantasy of a perfect start has ended. Reality is here, unfolding, unpredictable, and unavoidable.